this morning. Welcome to the Hokyoji Sunday morning Dharma talks. It's my pleasure this morning to welcome Reverend Tonen O'Connor. She's the resident Emerita priest of the Milwaukee Zen Center, where she began practice as a layperson in 1986 and received ordination from Tozen Akiyama in 1994 and Dharma transmission in 1999. She succeeded Reverend Akiyama as the resident priest in 2001, a position she held for until 2011. She returned as a head teacher from 2013 to 2015. Tonen trained in Japan at Shogoji, Hosshinji, and Hokyoji of Japan. And prior to the pandemic, made regular visits for practice at Saikouji. She joined with Zuiko Redding of Cedar Rapids Zen Center to lead for 8 years the Great Sky Sesshin, the forerunner of Hokyoji's present Jewel Mirror Sesshin. Beginning in 1998, for 17 years, Tonen offered Buddhist programs within the Wisconsin state prison system and works today with inmates via correspondence seminars. Tonen served on the board of directors for the Cedar Rapids Zen Center and worked her published works, and also Sanshin Zen Community, and her published works include a translation of the French version of Kodo, Sawaki's commentary on the Song of Awakening, and essays in The Hidden Lamp and the Eightfold Path, and most recently she conceived, edited, and wrote the introduction for Dharma Gates Are Boundless, featuring articles by 10 contemporary Zen teachers, and artwork by M. Winston, a brilliant African-American artist currently incarcerated within the Wisconsin system. And unfortunately, I don't have the title of a talk right in front of me right now, so I'm going to have to let her make that known to you. So thank you very much, and we welcome you very much, Tonen. Thank you for joining us.
Sure. Am I unmuted? Good, I'm unmuted. The talk is called The Fullness of Emptiness, which of course is a contradiction, but there you are. I decided to start out, living dangerously, I guess. I'm awfully happy to be connected again to Hokyoji, even if it's just by Zoom. I had many happy experiences practicing at Hokyoji during the years of the Great Sky Sesshin. I particularly remember with fondness the times that I was Tenzo, making meals for practitioners. And I also remembered just yesterday with some amusement, something that Dokai may also remember, in which I call the wasp episode. Zuiko Redding and I were living in a small cabin, and we made the mistake of disturbing a wasp's nest in the radiator. They came pouring out like some kind of really awful bee horror movie. And we spent the rest of the night on the floor in the tea room. So I remember it's one of these, it just rose in my mind when I was thinking about Hokyoji. But in any case, I'm not only delighted that I'm here, but I'm delighted that you are continuing to offer the Jewel Mirror Sesshin every year. It's a great gift to those of us here in the Midwest. So, as I said, I'm going to read, you'll have to forgive me a little bit, because I find that if I just wing it, I kind of maunder off. So I'm trying not to do that. And I chose to give this talk the title, Fullness of Emptiness. I realized it sounds a bit like a contradiction, if maybe not an impossibility. And I should also say right up front that I find the concept of emptiness to be one of the most positive and encouraging teachings of the Buddha. This is something else that you may find surprising, emptiness as encouraging. So I think our task together this morning is to try to understand how I've come to these conclusions that run somewhat counter to the way in which we often view emptiness. In fact, and many of you may know this, but early Westerners, when they encountered Buddhism and encountered emptiness, they considered it nihilistic, which I assure you it is not. They thought it was extremely negative. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. According to the texts, one of the most fundamental of the Buddhist teachings is that all conditioned phenomena are characterized by the trilakshana, or the three marks. These marks are impermanence, anicca, suffering, dukkha, and absence of self, anatman. The three marks were the result of the Buddha's careful observation of reality. You know, what ultimately made him the Buddha, or the awakened one, was that he saw what's happening with very clear eyes, untainted by ordinary views or by what he might wish was happening. And I think this clear seeing is what we hope to practice. And it's one reason that we allow our thoughts in Zazen to arise and vanish without response or grasping. So when we're not grasping thoughts, we begin to have direct experience of what is happening. Now, close observation showed the Buddha that all things, however stable they may appear, are in a constant state of alteration and change. A basic characteristic of all things is to be impermanent. A corollary to this was his realization of the absence of anything that could be called self. Now, if, that is, we define self as independently arisen, permanent, and fixed in nature, isolated in its being. It's important for us to remember that the Buddha called this absence not self, not really no self, but not self, or maybe non-self, naming, as he did so, a presence of some sort that was yet other than the misconceived notion of a permanent self. He didn't say that self does not exist, but only that our usual understanding of self does not exist. Also included in the Trilakshana is a reaction to these two marks of impermanence and not self. We have dukkha, a word I'm sure you're very familiar with. The Sanskrit word dukkha is commonly translated as suffering. But I found something really interesting in a dictionary of Sanskrit philosophical terms that I have. For this dictionary adds, quote, that which is unsatisfactory because it is impermanent. That which is unsatisfactory because it is impermanent. Now, it shouldn't be a surprise that with this, we arrive at the first two of the Four Noble Truths, dukkha, and its source in our craving for control, our desire to stop the inevitable process of impermanence. So to this situation, then, the Buddha added another acute observation, that of interdependence, or more precisely, dependent origination, praticca-samutpada. This understanding makes it clear that nothing arises independently. All things arise dependent upon causes and conditions and lack intrinsic being. The classical saying for this is, quote, when this exists, that arises, end quote. And with the natural consequence, when this does not exist, that does not arise. Nothing comes into being through its own power. Everything is a result. You and I ourselves are the result of causes and conditions. And when those causes and conditions change, we change. change becomes inevitable, given the constant, ceaseless interaction between impermanence, things changing, and dependent origination, things affecting one another. So we are empty of fixed being, of permanent self. There is something there at the intersection of causes and conditions, but it's not a permanent self. Rather, it is a provisional and changing self, the Buddha's not self. In the beginning, this idea of no fixed being was of special importance with regard to the concept of human self, and it took time for it to be applied to all things. There was resistance to the idea that emptiness is the nature of all things, and early researchers even tried to identify at least a few basic entities that could be considered permanent. However, with the gradual rise of the Mahayana tradition, emptiness came to be seen as the nature of all things. This concept was reinforced by the writings of Nagarjuna, the brilliant Indian philosopher who lived sometime during the 1st or 2nd centuries CE. And Nagarjuna demonstrated that the only possible existence is that created by the coming together of elements, and that impermanence is essential to that process. It is the relationship that is the basic reality. In Nagarjuna's Mulamachamaka Karika, translated by J.L. Garfield, I've always wanted to just spit that right out, Mulamachamaka Karika. But it's translated as the fundamental wisdom of the middle way. And he gives an example of the relationship between mover, moving, and motion. Now, we tend to think of those things as separate entities. There is a mover, there is moving, there is motion. But he suggests that each essentially defines the other. They can't do without each other. For motion depends on a mover. The mover is only a mover if moving, and moving is the definition of motion. It's what happens during motion. Actually, we point to something very familiar every day. We chant our meal services, and here again is something similar. We speak of the giver, receiver, and gift, or inextricably intertwined. They need one another for their very reality. Now, the concept of emptiness became the underpinnings of Mahayana teachings and, of course, of our own Zen tradition. However, I feel that there is sometimes a problem that arises in our understanding because the word emptiness is a noun, and in English, and a noun often implies a thing, a place, a something. And in fact, excuse me, an early 19th century translation of shunyata, the Sanskrit word for emptiness, was the void. Remember the void? When I first began to study, I used to imagine the void, somewhere out there, somewhere in the universe, an enormous hole that was very busy sort of spawning all existence. It's wrong to call it the void. But this kind of thinking, quite common, through which we turn emptiness into a location or some sort of container or condition, can lead us astray. For emptiness is not a thing or a place, rather it is a description. Emptiness is the description of the interaction between impermanence and interdependence, which leads to the state that we call change. Emptiness is how we describe the ceaseless process of coming and going in which all things come together to result in a new entity that lasts for a time and dissipates as conditions change. Given this, we need neither to seek emptiness nor to fear it, for we are already a result of it. You and I are a manifestation of emptiness. Sorry, morning coffee is essential. We can also run into difficulty, I think, when we fail to answer the questions inherent in this word emptiness. That is to say, well, what is it empty of? What is lacking? What's not there? What's missing? If something is empty, something's not there. So the usual reply that what is lacking is fixed and permanent being can, I think, leave us feeling afloat, unmoored, maybe a bit rudderless. Having said this, I think I should sort of inject here and help us remember the point that the terms shunyata, or emptiness, can be understood as equivalent to, equal to, the same as tatata or suchness. Both shunyata and tatata, emptiness and suchness, are ultimate reality. Suchness is the emptiness of inherent nature in all things, the most basic element of existence, for it is ceaseless change that results in the emergence of all things. So I hadn't thought about this before I started, trying to write this up for you. And I find it really interesting because we think of suchness as the most inherent something characteristic. And that is emptiness. That is change, impermanence. So what is emptiness of? What is emptiness empty of? What is lacking? What's not there? Missing are rigidity, permanence, strict boundaries, and the prison of unchanging nature. This is why I, at least, have come to feel that the truth of emptiness is thrillingly positive. Emptiness, lacking fixed nature, is full of potential. For if all things are empty of permanence, they are full of possibility. Empty of permanence, full of possibility. Lacking fixed nature, emptiness, lacking fixed nature, is a fullness of potential, of open horizons, of a lack of restricting barriers. To be empty is to be filled with possibility and the assurance of change. Now, yes, you will say, emptiness offers the possibility of change, but we can fear change. Fear what may be different, clinging to old situations, old ways of thinking, old ways of acting, and thus we experience dukkha, the suffering, the unsatisfactoriness of the first noble truth. In our resistance, we are battered like a straw that refuses to ride with the swift-flowing river that enters the calm of the great ocean. We hold back. We refuse to be in the river. We cry out in anguish that everything changes and do not see that the situation is filled with rich possibility because everything can change. We can ride change rather than being run over by it. We are offered the fullness of the possibilities created by emptiness. We are not imprisoned within the self, for we are not only the result of causes and conditions, but we ourselves function actively as a cause and a condition. We are part of the process. Emptiness of fixed being opens up a horizon that offers us choice and freedom. We are not stuck in place. We have potential for change. This is why I, at least, see emptiness as a thrilling and empowering teaching. We're not trapped within a fixed self, and we have an opportunity to accept and participate in the ceaseless flow of reality. For me, at least, this is a liberating realization. Thank you for listening. And I hope we can maybe have a little chat now about actually anything you'd like to talk about.
I have a question. This is Laura. I think some people confuse having a state of emptiness or experiencing emptiness with letting go. And I wouldn't necessarily equate the two. Can you give your opinion on that?
Well, let me think for just a minute. You know, we suggest that we let go. Now that's let go of things we're clinging to, right?
Yeah.
So in letting go, we accept the flow of impermanence. But emptiness is not to be without. Because some people, I think, maybe equate letting go is now I'm without it. Does that make sense? I've lost it. In a certain sense, it may be gone. But our whole feelings about having and losing can be a problem for us, I think. Because remember, the Heart Sutra suggests there's nothing to attain. Now, if there's nothing to get, there's nothing to lose. But the harder we have, we cling, the more we feel we've lost something when we let go. But I think emptiness is simply a process, part of which could be our letting go. We can be participating in a process of change. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else? Anything?
Good morning.
Morning.
Are we supposed to suffer certain things?
Are we supposed to? Who says so?
Well, let me explain. So, for instance, there are certain things I'm attached to.
Sure.
That I prefer to be attached to because they are gratifying, rewarding, a sense of fulfillment of my selfness.
Sure.
But they're impermanent. They're
Right.
going to change.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take, for instance, loving someone, they are going to die. They're not going to be present.
Right.
So my sense is, I wonder. I mean, isn't that something? If I do experience that, I engage in it. I want to do it. I know there's dukkha eventually, etc. And yet I know I am supposed to do this, because the opposite of this would be the rejection, the non-acceptance, the pushing away of what it is that I feel is part of that permanence.
That's terrific. That's a really good question. I think that, we speak in Buddhism about non-attachment, which does not mean detachment. It doesn't mean indifference or pushing away, but it means, I think, holding lightly. And the fact that we understand that everything changes will not prevent, nor I think should it, for instance, grief at the death of a loved one, because we are acknowledging the truth of impermanence and that we wish it weren't so. That those two go together. So it's, I know some people have become angry when a friend or a loved one dies. It shouldn't happen. But I think what we're saying here in terms of emptiness or impermanence is that it will happen. And I will be pained by it, and that's quite natural. So this business about things we should suffer, I'm not sure exactly what imperative there is, but I think that we do suffer from the major losses or changes in our life. And I think that's to be accepted, but again, not grasped and hung on to, because everything is moving. We can become mired in our senses of loss, even personally. I've lost a great many things over 89 years. And for some of them, I felt grief. And yet, as everything changes, it becomes simply part of the natural flow of life. So I guess what I'm saying is there are things you will suffer from, and that's absolutely natural, because I think it's important that we love people, we have self-respect, we do things we think are beneficial, in the full knowledge that we and the things we do are temporary. But I think I don't think we should ever be indifferent. And oddly enough, I think the fact that I'm flexible because of emptiness allows me to keep my affections flowing, if you will, keep seeing new things. But I do not see anything about Buddhism as a kind of negation of life. It's an affirmation of life. Life, however, will include loss. There's no question about it. So in a sense, accepting life means I'm accepting loss, because that's part of it. Am I making any sense? I think it's a fabulous question, because it's one we all struggle with. And the issue of attaching becomes very complicated. What is the difference? This is why I have some problems with some interpretations of the third noble truth, that the second one says that our desires and clinging are the cause of our suffering. The third one can be seen as, well, get rid of them. In other words, just stop your desires. Of course, that's not possible, not realistic, but also I think it's wrong, because desires have many forms. Some of them the most beneficial things you could imagine. Love and compassion, helping one another, those can be a desire, as well as, we like to sort of manage and control and keep in the background our hateful thoughts and bad actions and so on. But I have a great deal of trouble when people view the third noble truth as sort of damping down all, attachments, all desires. It's, you can't do it, number one. Number two, I don't think you should do it, but you should manage stuff, step back from. Again, letting go is a kind of stepping back from something that may be harmful, but you can certainly step into something that is beneficial. So thanks anyway. Sorry, I'm kind of long.
May I ask a follow-up question to that?
Sure, of course.
So one of the things you taught me, which I hadn't thought of before, is that the acceptance of emptiness allows for the possibility, allows for all possibilities, which is good. For me, I feel that's good. I understand that conceptually. But I also know that all possibilities includes lots of dukkha.
Yeah.
And from that point of view, I'm wondering what you might suggest. What you would recommend are the antidotes to pre-rejecting in your mind that it's all possibilities, but I will not like to accept the negative things. What are the antidotes to that?
Well, I think the antidote is accepting the unpleasant things. I mean, you can't stop them. You can't make them not happen. But I also think of it, one way, something that helps me anyway, is to take my ego kind of out of it. A long time ago, years ago, when I was in an exceptionally unhappy period of my life, my marriage was wreckage, etc. All that kind of bad stuff. And I had one, the classical, why me? A little voice said, why not? Oh, why not? It happens to everybody. It isn't all my dreadful story that I somehow got to manage. I think it also means if you can get past your, for me, huge annoyance that certain things have happened and you don't like them, to try rather quickly to go, well, now what do I do? And not waste a whole lot of energy wallowing about in, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this. I can give you a personal example from my own life. I'm 89 years old, and to my great displeasure, I've discovered I'm getting shaky on my legs. I've always been a great walker, a great, all this stuff. I still am as much as I can be. But about a week ago, I had the classic old person's fall. A little loose rug, not mine, a doormat in the entryway to here. I came gaily in from taking out the trash, slipped, and crashed, whacking my hand on a door frame so that it's still sort of black and blue. And, crawled into my apartment, and I said, I hate this. On the other hand, here it is. I have an appointment with my doctor on Friday to go in and say, we need a plan. Are there exercises? Is there something besides being ultra careful, as I taught her about? And that, in a funny way, gives me a sense that, okay, now I'm past that one, and I'm moving ahead. Doesn't mean I won't fall down again. I'm old in the hills. But if you follow that, it helps me to kind of get my resentment out of it. It happened. Well, oh, heck. Same thing can happen. You drop a favorite dish and it smashes and you just, nuts. Oh, nuts. Well, you got to get the broom and sweep it up. You do the next obvious thing. And if you're doing the next obvious thing, you can be a little too busy to spend too much time regretting what's impossible to change. That's done, that's gone. Am I making any sense here? So I guess, you take them as they come. There will be lots of it, but that's what impermanence implies, is all, you're right, you're absolutely right, all kinds of stuff. But the dukkha is my response to it. It's not the thing itself. Dukkha is my response. And you said, I hate it. I resent it. Why me? This shouldn't happen. It's not the time for it. All those things. That's my ego rising, throwing me straight into dukkha, meaning unsatisfactory. This is not what I want. And notice I said I. Yes, Tim. Hi.
Hi. Hello. I just thought I'd make the observation that when it comes to the unlimited possibilities and how that can include things that are going to be suffering or bad, that we can have a tendency, though, to assume the worst is going to happen out of all the possibilities. And really not give much credence to that things might turn out well.
Yeah.
If we can just drop the assuming the worst, I think that's huge. That's good enough almost sometimes.
Yes, absolutely. Partly because it's an assumption. And as far as I'm concerned, and those who know me will laugh because I say this all the time, but I always thought that the Buddhist basic teaching or question, never seen it in a sutra, but the question is, what's really going on here? Stop with the assumptions already. Thank you, Tim. That's very helpful. That's very helpful. Yes, Cuckoo. Oh dear, wait a minute.
What happened?
My neighbor is running the lawnmower. He'll be moving on in a moment.
Okay. I'll talk loudly. Does that help?
No, that I can hear you. It may be hard for you to hear me, but he's actually going to move away from my window.
So I just wanted to share an early experience I had that speaks to this crux here. It's kind of like, so it boils down to accept what is already happening because there's no other choice.
Yep.
So what comes up for me, and certainly was very strong initially, was I can't bear it. I can't bear it. And one of the things when I would articulate that, which was always a little scary, but it was my burning question.
Sure.
Would people would look and kind of go, well, you already are.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was initially a source of great dismay. Since then, I've been further helped by some of the Nikaya teachings where it's like, please look carefully at what happens when you get what you want.
Yes.
Look at that in detail. And that's not very satisfying. So there are days where the best I can do is to just kind of remind myself that if I don't accept what's going on, I have no better alternatives.
That's exactly
kind
right.
of negative.
Excuse me a minute.
Yeah.
I'm going to close my window here. I've got it open because
Okay.
it's 8 today, but hang on a sec.
And I guess the other thing, Taigyo, that helps me is just stopping and saying, is it true? When the voice comes up that says, I can't bear it. And a vivid remembrance for me was when my mom had a car accident. And it sort of, I kind of could see the full implications from there. And I found myself walking to the parking lot after I'd visited her in the hospital. And the thought came up, I can't bear this.
Mhm.
And I'd been practicing enough so that I literally stopped. And the question came up, is
Mhm.
that really 100%, no doubt about it, true? And so I thought, well, let's test it. Let me just take a breath and see how that is. And I did that, and I realized I can just take a breath, and nothing bad happened. Nothing unacceptable and unbearable arose. That's all.
That's very, very helpful. That's very helpful. I have nothing really to add to it, but so for me, if I say I can't bear it, I mean I don't want to bear it. And that's beside the point because I have to bear it. And which takes me full circle kind of to where you were, but that's a really helpful thing to say. I don't think we're in this world to avoid problems or the natural awfulnesses that happen at all. But we are hopefully finding a way to navigate them that is good for us and good for other people. I do think as well, I guess I refer to this primarily thinking of grief, but we mustn't tend to, dukkha is about clinging and craving. Well, sometimes I think we cling to our craving, our suffering. We cling to our suffering and we make that who we are. I'm grieving harder. I'm feeling more loss. I'm who I am as this dreadful, helpless person. And that's a kind of ego self-definition that we should make an attempt to let go of if we can. It's not, it goes beyond the quite natural responses that we all have. Anybody got anything else? Carl.
There we go. Yeah, thank you for your talk, Tonen. It was very nice and clear, and emptiness is often a confusing topic in Buddhism. And a couple of things that came up. One is as far as craving goes, the difference between wants and needs. There are actually, in the early sutras, there are wholesome cravings. The craving for the Dharma is stated right there as a wholesome craving. So not all cravings are negative. Not all cravings necessarily lead to suffering. And the second point, these there's reports of these pithy answers from certain of the old Chan masters, I think, and and they ask him, well, how would you describe a lifetime of practice, something like that? And one of the answers one of these guys gave was complete and unconditional cooperation with the inevitable. And
lovely.
It just, that's the way it is. And sometimes joy is inevitable, and sometimes suffering is inevitable. And, if you fight against it, it's just going to make it worse, it seems. So anyway, thanks again for your talk. I really enjoyed it.
That's lovely. So much about thinking about those old guys. Another one, someone said, what is the, it was like, what is the core of the Buddhist teachings? And the master said, an appropriate word. So again, it's always about, cooperating with what's happening, being appropriate. Being appropriate. And this is why I often like to think of, rather than good or bad. I like to think of appropriate or not appropriate, working with. So thanks. So that's lovely, Carl. Thank you. Anyone else? We okay?
Hi.
Hi.
Hokyoji.
Yes.
Oh, Joe Kai says I should go up to the camera.
It would help.
I guess it would help. Thank you for your talk this morning. So I think my question is about practice. I've been, listening to the talk and reflecting on emptiness and wondering about the things that sort of prevent us, like what prevents us from connecting with that truth, And one of the things that I see is that our difficult emotions can be really challenging. And, for me in my practice or my journey, a big part of it is sort of a movement. It's sort of like a reorientation in a sense, is how I feel about it. And you could say in a simple way, from like a negative to positive, like, sort of opening up to, a sort of affirmation and, participation. And so I guess my question is about practice. And one thing I'm wondering is, so you have worked with people in prison, and I wonder if there's anything you'd like to share, because I imagine, for people in prison, a lot of people in that circumstance have had a lot of painful circumstances in their lives. They may be carrying a lot of emotional pain. They may have a lot of anger. Have you, learned anything from them that you can share with us that kind of shed some light on this journey into a reorientation, let's say, something positive, Thank you.
That's a great question and a hard one. I've learned a lot. I'm still learning a lot. There are two things I think. Early on, people would say to me, what can Buddhism possibly, what can you offer a prison inmate? You're not going and offering salvation, And I realized that what I had to offer was impermanence, the possibility of change. Because the men, at least in Wisconsin, they all wear a little, sort of the size of a credit card, a little sign, and it says above their name in huge letters, offender. And I began to notice that whenever we had a meeting, they take these and put them inside their shirt so they could get them if an officer came by. But, that's not who you are. You're not an offender. You have a name and a history. But the fact that there was a horizon they could work toward. The other thing they've really taught me over all these years, and I'm still involved with probably 8 or 9 men, is determination to get past the anger, the lack of self-respect, the touchiness, the lack of feeling for anyone else, all these things that are common. I always loved being in groups within the prison system. And I'm doing a thing now called Zen Dialogue Seminar. I'm basically using koan, but they go out by mail and everybody responds in their own way. And I get real honesty. The men I worked with showed a their back is against the wall and they need to change. And they've showed a determination and a patience and a will in the most unimaginably difficult circumstances that shames me, shames an awful lot of us here on the outside who, we'd like to practice and we'd like to be different and we'd like to, we come and we go and we do this, we practice, we don't practice. But it's the willingness, the real need to understand what's going on with themselves. Very impressive. I mean, some of the people I admire most are people, some are out now and participating in groups that I have as outside people. Some of the people I respect most are people who 25 years ago did horrendous things. I mean, the mistakes that send you to prison are not necessarily small. Is that making any sense to you? So it's really, they when they understand it's possible to change, the sincerity with which they go after it is what they've given me. Yes.
I don't think it was in your bio introduction, but as I recall, you've published a book, I forget the title, with extensive interviews with 3 different prison inmates. What was the title of that again?
Buddha's Behind Bars.
Yes. So
yeah.
I like that very much. I just recommend that to others who might have an interest. Buddha's Behind Bars.
Yeah, it gives you a real sense, I think, of the man. What's interesting about that, Tim, since you've read it, is Toon, whose secular name is Raul Jimenez, has been out for about 5 years now, and he's an over-the-road long-haul truck driver. Very, very happy. I had coffee with him the other day. He's doing beautifully. Has re-established a relationship with his family and so on. Sun Bin, the Taoist, got out about a year ago, was released, and he's he's doing 2 things. He's working for a landscaping contractor and attending my Tuesday night Dharma talks and participating in the dialogue seminar. He's also state people with addiction problem. If you remember, he's the most violent of the 3. He's just wonderful. The 3rd person, Doug Stream, and
Did we lose her? Sometimes we lose it, at least I think she has left the meeting. Oh, there she is. Maybe, shall we wait a second here and see if she reappears? I see her on this.
Yeah, I'd wait a minute.
can you hear me?
Yes.
It says
Seem to be having,
well,
you can hear me.
recording. Huh.
your image is frozen, at least here at Hokyoji. I think there may be
Is frozen? No.
for others also. I think there may be a connection issue on your end that just cropped up.
Could be, could be. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, right? No. Can you hear me?
Oh, we might be hearing you okay. Your image is pretty frozen, but
Well, not at this end. So, I mean, but I don't look frozen to myself. We're almost finished anyway, I think. That's really odd. I didn't get any signal that I was having problems. It just went off.
Oh, and then maybe you could turn off your video. That might, if you have a few concluding words, maybe that'll help.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I can't see anyone. I can see Tim and I can see Hokyoji. Everybody else is, I can't see. Well, that's all right. But can you hear me?
Yes.
No. Yes.
Yeah.
Here they come. Huh. I have no idea what happened. Usually I get a little warning if it's at my end. All right. I was just finishing up with telling Tim about the 3 men in Buddhist Behind Bars, and the third person, Doug Stream, I hope will be out in about 6 months after 26, 27 years. So, good things are happening. We may have come to the end of this.
Okay. Maybe we should call it. It's about 10:30 right now, but thank you so much, Tonen, for your talk. I think it was very engaging for all of us. And why don't we close now with the 4 vows?
Oh, he's gone.
I'm sorry, did someone say something? Okay. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma Gates Are Boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Thank you once again, Tonen, and for everyone else joining us today. Have a good day. Hope to see you next week. Bye.
Thank you, Tonen.